Jiho Kim stared at the broken display panel in his cargo ship and wanted to scream. Red warning lights blinked across the control board like angry eyes. The hyperdrive was dead. Completely dead, and he was stuck at Nexus Station with exactly 53 credits in his account. Great, Jiho muttered in Korean, slumping back in his pilot chair. Just perfect. He had been hauling cargo between the outer colonies for 3 years. It was not glamorous work, but it paid enough to keep his small ship running and food in his belly. Now even that simple life was falling apart. The repair estimate from the station mechanics made his stomach hurt. 2,000 credits minimum. He might as well ask them to build him a new ship from scratch. With his current savings, he could maybe afford a decent meal and a night in the cheapest hotel pod on the station. Jiho locked up his ship and walked through the busy corridors of Nexus Station. The place never slept. Aliens from dozens of species hurried past him carrying cargo containers, data tablets, and strange devices he could not identify. Most ignored the lone human completely. He had been to Nexus Station many times before, but he had always been in a hurry to complete his cargo runs. Now, with nowhere to go and nothing to do but wait for a miracle, he decided to explore. The main levels of the station were clean and organized. Corporate offices lined the walls between shops selling standard supplies to travelers. Everything was expensive and boring, but Jiho remembered hearing other pilots talk about the lower levels. The places where the station authorities did not look too closely at what people bought and sold. He found the entrance to the Alien Bazaar, 3 levels down from the main commercial district. The moment he stepped through the doorway, the air changed. It smelled of strange spices, ozone from energy weapons, and something else he could not name. The lighting was dimmer here, coming from glowing crystals and bioluminescent plants rather than standard station fixtures. The bazaar stretched out before him like a maze. Vendors had set up stalls wherever they could find space. Some sold their goods from proper booths with energy barriers and security systems. Others simply laid their merchandise on blankets on the floor. Jiho saw weapons that hummed with barely contained power, jewelry made from metals that shifted color as he watched, and food that moved on its own. Four-armed trader tried to sell him a bottle of something, called liquid starlight. A creature that looked like a walking tree offered him seeds that would supposedly grow into small moons. Another vendor displayed what appeared to be bottled emotions in glowing containers. Jiho walked deeper into the bazaar, fascinated despite his money troubles. He had never seen so many different alien species in one place. Some he recognized from his cargo runs, others were completely new to him. A few looked so strange that he was not sure if they were alive or some kind of advanced machines. The noise was incredible. Dozens of different languages mixed together into a constant buzz of conversation. Translator devices helped, but they could not capture all the clicking, whistling, and humming sounds that different species used to communicate. Price haggling seemed to be universal, though. Even without understanding the words, Jiho could tell when someone was trying to drive a hard bargain. As he walked, the stalls became stranger and more mysterious. The vendors here seemed to be selling things that existed on the edge of legality, or maybe beyond it entirely. Jiho saw containers marked with warning symbols he did not recognize, weapons that looked like they could punch holes through small moons, data crystals that glowed with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. The crowds were thinner in this section of the bazaar. The aliens here moved more carefully, speaking in whispers. Some wore hoods or masks to hide their faces. Others had cybernetic modifications that made their original species hard to identify. Jiho was about to turn back when he heard a sound that stopped him cold. It was a low musical note that seemed to vibrate through his bones. The sound was filled with such sadness that it made his chest tight with emotion he could not explain. He followed the sound through a narrow passage between 2 stalls selling illegal ship modifications. The passage opened into a small clearing where a single vendor sat behind a collection of cages and containers. The vendor was a Kalari, a species Jiho had met before. They looked like humans might if humans had 6 arms and skin that changed color based on their mood. This one's skin was a dull gray that suggested boredom or depression, but Jiho barely noticed the vendor. His attention was completely focused on the largest cage in the collection. Inside the energy cage was the most magnificent creature he had ever seen. It was enormous, at least 15 meters from nose to tail tip. Its body was covered in scales that shifted from deep gold to silver as the light hit them. Massive wings were folded against its sides, and he could see the careful way it held them, suggested they were built for flight through space itself, not just atmosphere. The creature's head was lifted slightly, and Jiho found himself looking into eyes the color of molten gold. There was intelligence in those eyes, ancient intelligence that seemed to carry the weight of countless years. And there was something else, a sadness so deep it made the musical sound he had heard seem like a whisper compared to a scream. "You like the stellar dragon," the Kalari vendor said in accented standard. His translator made his words sound flat and emotionless, but his gray skin was shifting toward purple. Embarrassment or shame, if Jiho remembered correctly. "Stellar dragon," Jiho repeated softly. He had heard legends of such creatures, but he had always assumed they were myths, stories told by drunk spacers in port bars. "Last of his kind," the vendor continued. "Very rare, very valuable, but dying now. No good for fighting or working anymore. Still worth something to collectors, though. Scales make good armor. Bones have special properties." The dragon turned its massive head toward Jiho and made that low musical sound again. Up close it sounded even sadder, like a song of mourning for everything that had been lost and would never be found again. "How much?" Jiho asked without thinking. "For you, human." 50 credits. Fair price. Dragon dies soon anyway. Better to sell now than wait. 50 credits. Nearly everything he had left in the world. It was insane to even consider it. He needed that money for food and shelter, while he figured out how to get his ship repaired. Buying a dying alien creature was the last thing he should do. But those golden eyes were looking at him with such resigned dignity that he felt his heart breaking. The dragon was not begging or pleading. It was simply accepting its fate with a grace that Jiho had rarely seen in any intelligent being. 50 credits, he said, pulling out his credit chip. The Kalari's skin shifted to bright yellow. Surprise and pleasure. "Excellent choice, human. Very good for parts. I throw in the cage for free." As the transaction processed, Jiho wondered what he was doing. He was probably making the biggest mistake of his life. But as he looked into those ancient golden eyes, he knew he could not walk away and leave this creature to be butchered for parts. At least he could give it a peaceful death away from the noise and crowds of the bazaar. It deserved that much dignity. The dragon watched him with what might have been curiosity as the energy cage was transferred to a small hover platform. For just a moment, Jiho thought he saw something that looked like hope flicker in those golden depths. But that was impossible. It was just a dying animal after all, wasn't it? Jiho guided the hover platform through the narrow corridors of Nexus Station, toward the docking bay where his ship waited. The dragon remained perfectly still inside the energy cage, but those golden eyes never stopped watching him. Other people in the corridors stared at the massive creature with mixtures of fear and curiosity. A few laughed and pointed at the human who had obviously been cheated by a clever alien merchant. "Stupid human bought a dead dragon," he heard someone whisper in standard as they passed. Jiho ignored them. He was starting to wonder if they were right, though. What was he planning to do with a 15-meter-long dying alien in his tiny cargo hold? His ship was designed for transporting containers of goods, not enormous living creatures. When they reached his ship, Jiho realized his first problem. The dragon was too big to fit through the cargo bay doors while still in the cage. He would have to release it first, then hope it was too weak to cause trouble. "Sorry about this," he said to the dragon as he began shutting down the energy cage. "I know this is not much better than where you were, but at least it will be quiet." The cage flickered and disappeared. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the dragon slowly unfolded its massive form and stepped onto the metal deck of the cargo hold. Even with its head lowered, it nearly touched the ceiling. Its wings remained carefully folded to avoid hitting the walls. Jiho backed toward the door controls, ready to seal himself in the cockpit if the creature became aggressive. Instead, the dragon simply lowered itself to the floor with obvious exhaustion. Its breathing was slow and labored, and the scales that had seemed so magnificent in the bazaar now looked dull and lifeless. "You really are dying, aren't you?" Jiho said softly. He went to his small galley and filled a large container with water. When he returned to the cargo hold, the dragon had not moved. Jiho placed the water within reach of the creature's head, then sat down on a supply crate a few meters away. "I don't know why I bought you," he admitted in Korean. Speaking his native language felt more comfortable somehow, even though he was sure the dragon could not understand him. "I guess I just couldn't stand to see you turned into spare parts." The dragon lifted its massive head and looked directly at Jiho. For the first time since leaving the bazaar, It made that low musical sound. But now in the quiet of the cargo hold, Jiho could hear something else in the sound. Not just sadness, but something that might have been gratitude. You probably lived for thousands of years, didn't you? Jiho continued. Saw whole civilizations rise and fall. And here you are, stuck in some human's broken-down cargo ship waiting to die. He leaned back against the bulkhead and closed his eyes. At least you won't die alone. I'll stay with you until the end. The cargo hold fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's life support systems. Jiho felt himself starting to doze off. The stress of the day and the shock of spending nearly all his remaining money on an impossible impulse were catching up with him. He was almost asleep when something touched his mind. It was not like hearing a voice or seeing an image. It was more like suddenly remembering something he had forgotten, except the memory was not his own. For just an instant, he felt himself flying through space between distant stars, his wings spread wide to catch the solar winds of a dozen different suns. Jiho's eyes snapped open. The dragon was staring at him intently, its golden eyes brighter than they had been before. What was that? He whispered. Another touch, gentler this time. Images flowed through his mind. A beautiful world with crystal cities that reached toward twin moons. Creatures like the dragon soaring through aurora-filled skies. Then darkness. Fire. Ships filled with beings he did not recognize hunting the dragons through space, destroying their worlds, capturing the survivors. The images faded, leaving Jiho gasping. His head felt like someone had tried to pour an ocean of information through a drinking straw. You're trying to talk to me, he said in amazement. You're actually trying to communicate. The dragon made a sound that was not quite the musical tone from before. This one was deeper, more complex, and somehow Jiho understood that it meant yes. How is this possible? I'm just a human cargo pilot. I don't have any special abilities or training for this kind of thing. More images flowed through their connection, clearer this time. Jiho saw himself in the bazaar, looking at the dragon with compassion instead of greed or fear. He felt the creature's shock at finding someone who saw it as more than just a collection of valuable parts. Then came something that made his breath catch in his throat. The dragon had a name. Astrum. Astrum, Jiho said out loud, and the dragon's head lifted higher. That's your name, isn't it? The connection between them seemed to grow stronger. Astrum shared more of his story in a flood of images and emotions that left Jiho overwhelmed. The dragons had not been simple animals. They had been guardians of something vast and important, protectors of cosmic forces that most species could not even perceive. They had been hunted to extinction not because they were dangerous, but because they were inconvenient. The younger species wanted to expand and exploit without limits, and the dragons represented ancient laws and responsibilities that got in the way of unlimited growth. You're the last one, Jiho said, understanding flooding through him. The very last of your kind. Astrum confirmed this with a wave of sadness so profound that Jiho felt tears running down his cheeks. But there was something else mixed with the sadness. Hope. Fragile and uncertain, but definitely hope. Why? Jiho asked. What could I possibly do to help you? I'm nobody special. I can't even fix my own ship. The answer came not in words or images, but in a feeling that settled deep in his bones. The dragons had been dying not from age or disease, but from loneliness and despair. They were creatures that needed connection, needed purpose. For centuries, Astrum had been treated as nothing more than a valuable object to be bought and sold. But Jiho had seen him as a living being, deserving of compassion. That simple recognition had been enough to rekindle something that had been dormant for decades. A bond, Jiho whispered, as understanding dawned. You're trying to form some kind of bond with me. Astrum's confirmation was accompanied by a warning. The bonding process was not something that could be undone. If Jiho accepted the connection, their lives would be intertwined forever. They would share not just thoughts and emotions, but their very life forces. It was dangerous. If one of them died, the other would likely die as well. And Jiho would be changed in ways he could not fully understand or predict. But if I don't accept, Jiho said slowly, you'll die anyway. And I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I could have saved the last of your species. He stood up and walked closer to Astrum. The dragon's massive head was now at eye level with him. Those golden eyes held depths of intelligence and experience that made him feel like a child by comparison. I don't understand what's happening, Jiho said. I don't know what kind of responsibilities I might be taking on. But I can't just let you fade away when I might be able to help. He reached out slowly and placed his hand on the warm scales between Astrom's eyes. The moment their skin made contact, the world exploded into light and sensation. Jiho felt his consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of his human brain. He was still himself, but he was also more than himself. He could feel the pulse of the station's power core 3 decks below them. He could sense the movement of ships in the space around Nexus Station. Most incredibly, he could perceive the very fabric of spacetime itself, stretched thin by countless hyperspace jumps. But with the expanded awareness came expanded responsibility. Through Astrom's memories, he began to understand what the dragons had protected, and why their extinction had been such a catastrophe for the galaxy. The universe was not as stable as most species believed. It was a complex web of forces and energies that required constant maintenance. The dragons had been part of that maintenance system for millions of years. Without them, certain critical balances were beginning to fail. "We have work to do," Jiho said, and his voice sounded different to his own ears, deeper, more resonant. Astrom's response was pure joy mixed with determination. The bond was complete. The last stellar dragon was no longer alone, and his human partner was no longer just a simple cargo pilot. They were something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before, and they were both very much alive. Jiho woke up feeling like his brain had been rewired overnight. Everything looked different through his enhanced senses. He could feel the electrical currents running through the ship's systems. He could sense the gravitational pull of the station's rotating sections. Most disturbing of all, he could perceive tiny cracks in the fabric of space itself. Invisible wounds left behind by too many ships jumping to hyperspace in this area. Astrom was sleeping in the cargo hold, but even in sleep their bond remained active. Jiho could feel the dragon's contentment like warm sunlight in the back of his mind. For the first time in decades, Astrom was not alone. The peace was shattered. When Jiho's communication system activated with an incoming priority message, "This is Corporate Security Agent Daeun Park requesting immediate boarding permission for inspection purposes," a cold female voice announced in Korean. "You have 30 seconds to comply or we will override your locks." Jiho's blood turned to ice. Corporate security only got involved when someone had done something very illegal or very valuable. He had not done anything illegal that he knew of, which meant they must want something valuable. Something like the last living stellar dragon in the galaxy. "Astrom," he whispered urgently. "We have company." The dragon's consciousness touched his, instantly alert. Through their bond, Astrom shared a flood of memories about corporate security forces and what they did to rare creatures. None of those memories were pleasant. 15 seconds, Kim, the voice continued. "Open up or we're coming in anyway." Jiho activated the communication system. "This is my ship," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You need proper legal authorization to board." "I have authorization," Agent Park replied. "You transported stolen corporate data in your last cargo run. That makes you either a thief or an accomplice. Either way, I'm coming aboard." The docking clamps engaged with a heavy thud that vibrated through the ship's hull. Jiho heard the hiss of an airlock connection being forced. Whoever this corporate agent was, she had serious equipment and the authority to use it. "Stay hidden," Jiho told Astrom through their mental link. "I'll try to get rid of her." But even as he said it, he knew it was hopeless. His cargo hold was not designed to hide a 15-meter dragon. If this agent was thorough, she would find Astrom within minutes. The inner airlock door opened and a woman in dark corporate security armor stepped into his ship. She was shorter than Jiho but carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her dark eyes missed nothing as they scanned the ship's interior. "Agent Daeun Park," she said, showing him an identification badge that looked official enough. "I'm investigating the theft of classified research data from Kepler Station. My sources indicate the data was hidden in a cargo shipment you transported 3 weeks ago." "I just haul whatever cargo I'm paid to haul," Jiho said. "I don't open the containers or ask questions about what's inside them." "Smart policy," Daeun said, but her tone suggested she did not believe him. "Mind if I take a look around?" Standard procedure. It was not really a question. She was already moving toward the cargo hold, her hand resting casually on the weapon at her hip. Jiho followed helplessly as she approached the sealed door. Through his bond with Astrom, He could feel the dragon's growing agitation. The creature was still weak from his long captivity, but the bonding process had restored some of his strength. If he felt threatened enough, he might do something that would reveal exactly what he was capable of. Interesting, Dayun said, pausing at the cargo hold door. Your manifest shows this compartment is empty, but my scanners are detecting a very large biosignature inside. She pressed the door control before Jiho could think of a way to stop her. The door slid open, revealing the cargo hold where Astrum lay curled in the center of the space. Dayun's reaction was not what Jiho expected. Instead of shock or fear, her eyes lit up with something that looked like greed mixed with professional excitement. Well, she said softly. A stellar dragon. I thought they were all extinct. He's dying, Jiho said quickly. I bought him from a dealer in the bazaar. He's not worth anything to anyone. Not worth anything? Dayun laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Do you have any idea what the Galactic Council will pay for a living stellar dragon? Dead or alive, these creatures are worth more than some entire star systems. Astrum raised his massive head and looked directly at the corporate agent. His golden eyes held a warning that even someone without their bond could not have missed. This was not a helpless dying animal. This was an ancient predator who had simply been biding his time. The Council has had a standing bounty on stellar dragons for over 200 years. Dayun continued, apparently unimpressed by the dragon's threatening posture. 50 million credits for a living specimen. 25 million for a corpse in good condition. She turned to Jiho with a smile that made his skin crawl. Congratulations, Kim. You just became the richest cargo pilot in this sector of the galaxy. Too bad you won't live long enough to spend the money. Wait, Jiho said desperately. You said I transported stolen data. What about that investigation? There was no stolen data, Dayun admitted casually. That was just an excuse to board your ship legally. My real job was tracking reports of stellar dragon sightings in this area. Took me weeks to trace the creature to that bazaar, and by the time I got there, some idiot had already bought it. She drew her weapon, a sleek energy pistol designed for close-quarters combat. The idiot turned out to be you. Lucky me. Through his bond with Astrum, Jiho felt the dragon's rage building like a storm gathering strength. The creature had been hunted, captured, and sold like property for decades. Now, just when he had found hope again, another hunter had arrived to destroy everything. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Jiho said. He's not just an animal. He's intelligent. He has thoughts and feelings and memories going back thousands of years. I know exactly what he is, Dayun replied. That's what makes him so valuable. The Council has been studying dragon remains for centuries, trying to understand their abilities. A living specimen will advance their research by decades. Astrum made a sound that was nothing like his previous musical tones. This was a deep rumble that seemed to come from the very core of his being. The sound made the metal walls of the cargo hold vibrate in harmony. Easy there, big guy, Dayun said, raising her weapon. I'd prefer to take you alive. But dead works too. That was when Astrum showed her exactly why the Galactic Council considered stellar dragons to be so dangerous. The gravity in the cargo hold suddenly shifted. Instead of pulling down toward the deck, it began pulling sideways toward the walls. Loose objects started floating through the air as if the artificial gravity generators had malfunctioned. But Jiho, through his bond with the dragon, knew this was no malfunction. Astrum was manipulating the gravitational forces directly, bending them to his will with the same ease that a human might wave their hand. Dayun's confident expression vanished as she found herself pressed against the wall by invisible forces. Her weapon was torn from her grip and sent spinning across the room. She struggled against the gravitational field, but she might as well have been trying to fight a black hole with her bare hands. Impossible, she gasped. The report said they could manipulate energy fields, but nothing like this. The reports were incomplete, Jiho said, and he was surprised by how calm his own voice sounded. The dragons were guardians of cosmic forces. Gravity is just one of the tools they used. Astrum's control was precise. Dayun was pinned harmlessly against the wall, unable to move but in no immediate danger. Her weapon and equipment floated serenely in the center of the room, well out of her reach. This changes things, she said, and despite her helpless position, she sounded more excited than afraid. A dragon with active powers? The Council will pay triple the standard bounty, maybe more. You're not taking him anywhere, Jiho said firmly. Really? Daeun managed to turn her head enough to look at him. And how exactly do you plan to stop me? I didn't come here alone, Kim. I have a full corporate battlecruiser waiting just outside scanner range. One signal from me and they'll blast this entire section of the station into space dust. Through his bond with Astrum, Jiho felt the dragon's amusement. The creature was not worried about corporate battlecruisers. Dragons had faced much worse enemies than humans with energy weapons, but Jiho was still very much human, and the thought of innocent people on the station being killed because of him made his stomach clench with fear. What do you want? He asked. Simple, Daeun said. Surrender the dragon voluntarily, and I'll make sure you get a small finder's fee before I turn you over to the authorities for harboring an illegal alien specimen. Refuse and I'll take him anyway, but you and everyone else on this station will be listed as casualties in the crossfire. Astrum's mental voice touched Jiho's consciousness, calm and determined. The dragon had made his choice long ago. He would rather die fighting than spend one more day as a captive specimen, but Jiho was not ready to give up yet. Through their bond, he could feel new abilities awakening in his own mind, powers that came from his connection to a being who had once helped maintain the balance of the entire universe. Jiho's threat about navigation problems turned out to be more real than even he had expected. Through his bond with Astrum, he could now sense the corporate battlecruiser hiding behind one of Nexus Station's cargo platforms. The ship's computers were starting to malfunction as Astrum's presence interfered with their delicate sensor arrays. What are you doing to my ship? Daeun demanded from where she remained pinned against the wall. We're not doing anything, Jiho said truthfully. Your computers just weren't designed to function near a being who can manipulate gravitational fields. The interference is automatic. On her risk communicator, Daeun's team was starting to report problems. Navigation was failing. Weapon systems were showing error messages. Even basic life support was having trouble maintaining stable readings. This is impossible, she said, but her voice carried less confidence than before. A new voice came through the ship's communication system, speaking in heavily accented standard. Attention, corporate vessel. This is Nexus Station Control. You are experiencing technical difficulties that pose a danger to civilian traffic. Please move to a safe distance while you resolve your problems. Jiho recognized the voice. It belonged to Min-Soo Choi, the chief engineer who had been working on Nexus Station for longer than anyone could remember. Jiho had dealt with him before during routine maintenance stops, and the man had always been gruff but fair. What Jiho did not know was that Min-Soo had been monitoring the corporate ship's approach and had quickly figured out what was happening. The old engineer had his own reasons for disliking corporate security forces. Station Control, this is Agent Park, Daeun said into her communicator. We are conducting official business. We do not require assistance. Official business that involves pointing weapons at a civilian space station. Min-Soo's voice carried a note of amusement. Funny how corporate security always seems to have technical problems when they try to threaten innocent people. On his private communication channel, Jiho heard a different message. Kim, this is Choi. I've been watching your situation. If you need help, dock at Maintenance Bay 7. I can provide some temporary shielding from their sensors. Jiho looked at Daeun, who was still helplessly pinned by Astrum's gravitational manipulation. Agent Park, I'm going to make you an offer. I'll release you unharmed if you and your ship leave Nexus Station immediately, and don't come back. You're making a huge mistake, she replied. I'm not the only hunter looking for your dragon. Word is already spreading through the bounty hunting networks. Soon this station will be crawling with every mercenary and corporate agent in this sector. Then we'll deal with them when they arrive, Jiho said with more confidence than he felt. He nodded to Astrum, who gradually reduced the gravitational field holding Daeun in place. She dropped to the deck, grabbed her weapon, and backed toward the airlock. This isn't over, Kim, she said. The council will pay me 50 million credits for that creature, dead or alive. I'm not giving up that kind of money just because you can perform a few gravity tricks. Then you'll have to catch us first, Jiho replied. After Daeun left, Jiho quickly prepared his ship for departure. The hyperdrive was still broken, but the regular engines worked well enough to move around the station. As he guided the ship toward Maintenance Bay 7, he felt Astrum's consciousness exploring their surroundings through their bond. The dragon was fascinated by the station's construction. Through his enhanced senses, he could perceive the careful balance of forces that kept the massive structure stable as it rotated through space. But he could also sense the stress fractures that centuries of expansion had created. Nexus Station was larger and more complex than its original builders had ever intended. Maintenance Bay 7 was one of the older sections of the station, built back when everything was constructed to last instead of being designed for quick profits. The moment Jiho's ship docked, the bay's blast shields closed, hiding them from external sensors. Min-Soo Choi was waiting for them at the airlock. He was a compact man in his 60s with calloused hands and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. His maintenance coveralls were clean, but showed the wear of decades spent working with Starship engines. "So," he said as Jiho emerged from his ship, "you're the fool who bought himself a stellar dragon." "Word travels fast," Jiho said. "Everything travels fast on a space station," Min-Soo replied. "Especially news about someone spending their last credits on an impossible purchase. Most people think you're crazy. Most people are probably right." Min-Soo studied him carefully. "Maybe. Or maybe you're the first person in a long time to do something because it was right instead of because it was profitable. Mind if I take a look at your new friend?" Jiho hesitated, then decided he had to trust someone. He led Min-Soo into the cargo hold where Astrum waited. The dragon had managed to fold himself into a more compact position, but he still dominated the small space. "Magnificent," Min-Soo breathed, and there was genuine awe in his voice. "I've seen pictures in old databases, but seeing the real thing is completely different." Astrum regarded the engineer with calm interest. Through their bond, Jiho sensed the dragon's approval. Min-Soo looked at the creature with respect rather than greed. "You know," Min-Soo said slowly, "I wasn't always a station engineer. Long time ago I served in the Earth Colonial Defense Force. Saw some things that made me question who the real villains were in this galaxy." He turned to Jiho. "Your corporate friend is right about one thing. Word about your dragon is spreading fast. By tomorrow, every bounty hunter and mercenary within 50 light years will be heading this way. You need help." "What kind of help?" Jiho asked. "The kind that comes from people who have their own reasons for disliking corporate security," Min-Soo said. "Let me introduce you to someone." He activated his communicator and sent a coded message. Within minutes, a young woman arrived at the maintenance bay. She was Korean like Jiho, probably in her late 20s with short black hair and the intense expression of someone who spent most of her time thinking about complex problems. "This is Hana Lee," Min-Soo said. "She's a xenobiologist working at the station's research facility. Hana, meet Jiho Kim and his friend Astrum." Hana's eyes went wide when she saw the dragon. "A living stellar dragon," she whispered. "This changes everything we thought we knew about their species." "What do you mean?" Jiho asked. "The research I've been doing," Hana explained, moving slowly toward Astrum with the careful movements of someone accustomed to working with dangerous creatures. "For the past 3 years, I've been studying genetic samples from dragon remains found on dead worlds. The DNA pattern suggested that stellar dragons were designed for some kind of symbiotic relationship with other species." Astrum made his musical sound, and Hana stopped in surprise. "He's trying to communicate, isn't he?" "More than that," Jiho said. "We've formed some kind of mental bond. I can sense his thoughts and emotions. Sometimes I can even see his memories." Hana's excitement was obvious. "Incredible. The genetic markers I found suggested this was possible, but I never thought I'd see it actually happen." "May I run some scans?" "Nothing invasive, just basic readings to understand how the bonding process works." Through their connection, Jiho felt Astrum's curiosity about the young scientist. The dragon had spent so long being treated as a specimen that finding someone who wanted to understand rather than exploit him was a new experience. "He says yes," Jiho said, "but he wants to know why you're interested in helping us." Hana looked directly at Astrum as she answered. "Because your species was murdered by beings who were afraid of what they didn't understand. The research I've been doing suggests that dragons weren't just random predators. You serve some kind of cosmic function that we've lost with your extinction." She turned to Jiho. "The galaxy has been experiencing an increase in what we call dimensional instabilities. Space itself is showing stress fractures from too much hyperspace travel. Stars are going nova ahead of schedule. Entire systems are reporting gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist." Through his bond with Astrum, Jiho suddenly understood what she was talking about. The dragon's memories showed him images of the universe as it truly was. A vast web of interconnected forces that required constant maintenance. The dragons had been part of that maintenance system for millions of years. You're saying the problems we're seeing now are because the dragons are gone? Jiho said. I'm saying it's possible, Hana replied. And if that's true, then you and Astrum might be the key to preventing a cosmic catastrophe that could destroy entire sectors of the galaxy. Minsu nodded grimly. Which is exactly why the corporate powers don't want you to succeed. They've built their empires by exploiting the galaxy's resources without regard for long-term consequences. The last thing they want is someone who can restore the natural order. So what do we do? Jiho asked. First we keep you both alive, Minsu said. I can upgrade your ship's defenses and give you better engines. Hana can run her tests and help you understand what you're dealing with. And I can contact some old friends who might be willing to help. What kind of friends? Jiho asked suspiciously. Minsu smiled, and for the first time since they had met, he looked genuinely happy. The kind who believe that sometimes the right thing to do is tell the powerful people of the galaxy to go to hell. 3 days later, Nexus Station was surrounded by ships. They came from every corner of the galaxy. Corporate security vessels, independent bounty hunters, mercenary fleets, and even representatives from species that Jiho had never heard of. All of them wanted the same thing. The last living stellar dragon. Hana had been working around the clock, running every test she could think of on both Jiho and Astrum. Her findings were more incredible than anything she had dared to hope for. The bonding process is rewriting your DNA, she explained to Jiho as they huddled in the maintenance bay that had become their temporary headquarters. Not completely, but enough to give you access to abilities that should be impossible for a human. What kind of abilities? Jiho asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew. Enhanced spatial awareness for one thing, Hana said, consulting her datapad. Your brain is processing gravitational fields the same way it processes light and sound. You're also showing increased resistance to radiation and vacuum exposure. Most interesting of all, you seem to be developing the ability to perceive what I can only call the fundamental structure of reality itself. Through his bond with Astrum, Jiho felt the dragon's amusement at the scientist's amazement. To Astrum, these abilities were as natural as breathing. It was like watching someone be amazed that humans could see colors. There's something else, Hana continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. The energy readings I'm getting from both of you are off the charts. Whatever power source dragons use, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's not fusion, not antimatter, not even dark matter manipulation. It's something that exists at the quantum level of space-time itself. Minsu looked up from the weapon systems he was installing on Jiho's ship, which explains why every power in the galaxy wants to get their hands on him. They're not just hunting a rare creature, they're hunting a living key to unlimited energy. That night, as the station's artificial day cycle dimmed to simulate evening, Astrum shared more of his memories with Jiho. But these were not the painful memories of loss and captivity. These were ancient memories from the time when the galaxy was young and the dragon species served their true purpose. Jiho found himself experiencing the universe as Astrum once had, soaring between stars on currents of gravity and magnetic force. He saw solar systems in their infancy, watched civilizations rise and fall across millions of years, and witnessed the careful work that the dragons did to maintain cosmic stability. The universe, he learned, was not the empty void that most species believed it to be. It was a living system, as complex and delicate as any biological organism. Stars were like cells in a vast body. Planets were organs serving specific functions, and the dragons had been the immune system, identifying and correcting problems before they could spread. Your species destroyed the galaxy's ability to heal itself, Jiho said in wonder as the visions faded. Astrum's response was tinged with sadness but also with growing hope. The bonding with Jiho had shown him that there might be another way. Humans had something that dragons had never possessed: the ability to adapt and learn at incredible speed. Where dragons took centuries to master their abilities, humans might do it in years or even months. You're saying I could learn to do what the dragons did, Jiho said. The answer came not in words, but in a flood of images showing him what was possible. With training and practice, he could learn to perceive the health of entire star systems. He could identify the stress fractures in space-time that too much hyperspace travel was creating. Most importantly, he could help repair the damage that centuries of neglect had caused. But there was a catch. The abilities came with a terrible responsibility. Once he fully awakened to his potential, He would be able to see every wound the galaxy had suffered. Every dying star, every poisoned world, every species driven to extinction by greed and short-sightedness. The knowledge would be overwhelming unless he learned to control it. And if I can't handle it? Jiho asked. Astrom's answer was honest and frightening. Humans who attempted the bonding and failed did not simply return to normal. They either died from the sensory overload or worse, they went insane from the weight of cosmic awareness without the emotional strength to bear it. But you think I can handle it? Jiho said. The dragon's confidence in him was absolute. In all his centuries of captivity, Astrom had never met a being with Jiho's combination of compassion and inner strength. The human had proven his character by buying a dying creature for no reason except kindness. That single act had demonstrated the moral foundation necessary to wield cosmic power responsibly. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert from Minsu. We have a problem, the engineer announced over the communicator. Long-range sensors are picking up something big heading this way. Multiple jump signatures. This isn't just bounty hunters anymore. Jiho and Astrom made their way to the engineering station where Minsu and Hana were studying sensor readings that made no sense to human eyes. What are we looking at? Jiho asked. A fleet, Minsu said grimly. Corporate, but not just any corporate fleet. This is a full battle group with heavy cruisers and assault carriers. They're not planning to capture your dragon anymore. They're planning to take him by force and destroy anyone who gets in their way. Through his enhanced senses, Jiho could feel the approaching ships like a storm front moving across space. There were at least 30 vessels armed with weapons that could reduce Nexus Station to debris in minutes. How long do we have? He asked. 6 hours, maybe 7. Hana said, her face pale with fear. They'll arrive with overwhelming force and demand the immediate surrender of the dragon. If the station refuses, they'll attack. The station administrators won't sacrifice thousands of innocent lives for one creature, Minsu said, no matter how unique he is. Through their bond, Jiho felt Astrom's growing anger. The dragon had spent centuries being hunted and caged, and now an entire fleet was coming to drag him back into captivity. But beneath the anger was something else. A cold determination that made Jiho's blood run cold. Astrom, he said carefully, what are you planning? The dragon's response came in images rather than words. Jiho saw the corporate fleet approaching Nexus Station with their weapons charged and their boarding parties ready. He saw the station's inadequate defenses trying desperately to protect the civilian population. And he saw what would happen if Astrom decided to fight back with his full power. The battle would be brief and devastating. The corporate ships would discover that their weapons were useless against a being who could manipulate gravity itself. Astrom would tear their fleet apart, crushing their ships like empty cans. But the effort would also destabilize the space around Nexus Station, potentially killing everyone aboard. There has to be another way, Jiho said desperately. But even as he said it, he could feel something stirring in the depths of space. Through his growing cosmic awareness, he sensed presences that had been sleeping for millennia, ancient beings who had been waiting for a sign that their time of hiding was over. Jiho, Hana said urgently, you need to see this. She had been monitoring deep space communications, and her screens were now filled with signals that should not have existed. Ships were emerging from hyperspace all around the station. But these were not corporate vessels or bounty hunters. These ships were unlike anything in the current galactic database. Their designs were organic, flowing, and beautiful in a way that spoke of civilizations far older than anything humans had encountered. As Jiho watched, more and more vessels appeared, forming a protective barrier around Nexus Station. Who are they? Minsu whispered. Through his bond with Astrom, Jiho suddenly understood. They're the allies, he said in amazement. Species that worked with the dragons before the extinction. They've been hiding, waiting for a sign that the dragons might return. The largest of the alien vessels sent a communication to Nexus Station. The message was in a language that human translators could not parse, but Astrom understood it perfectly. Through their bond, he shared the meaning with Jiho. We have not forgotten our ancient promises, the message said. We stand ready to protect the last dragon and his chosen companion. The time of hiding is over. The galaxy will remember what it chose to forget. As the corporate fleet dropped out of hyperspace and found themselves facing an impossible sight, Jiho realized that his simple act of kindness had triggered something much larger than he had ever imagined. The galaxy was about to remember why the dragons had been so important. and why their extinction had been such a catastrophic mistake. Through his bond with Astrum, he felt the dragon's satisfaction. The plan that had been centuries in the making was finally beginning to unfold. The corporate powers thought they were coming to capture a single valuable creature. Instead, they were about to face the return of the galaxy's true guardians. The corporate fleet admiral could not believe what his sensors were showing him. His 30-ship battle group had arrived at Nexus Station expecting to face some lightly armed cargo vessels and maybe a few station defense platforms. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by over 100 alien ships of unknown design and capability. Admiral Kwan, his tactical officer, reported with barely controlled panic. The alien vessels are not responding to our identification requests. Their technology signatures don't match anything in our databases. Admiral Kwan had spent his entire career fighting rebels and pirates who used stolen corporate equipment. He had never faced an enemy with completely unknown capabilities. What's their weapons status? Unknown, sir. Our scanners can't penetrate their hull materials. For all we know, those ships could be completely unarmed or they could carry planet-killing weapons. Through his bond with Astrum, Jiho could sense the confusion and growing fear aboard the corporate ships. The dragon shared his amusement at their predicament. For centuries, the younger species had believed they were the masters of the galaxy. Now they were discovering how much they still didn't know. "This is Admiral Kwan of the Corporate Security Force," came the transmission to Nexus Station. "We are here on official business to retrieve stolen property. Any interference with our mission will be considered an act of war against the corporate consortium." The response came not from the station, but from the largest of the alien vessels. When the translation finally processed, the message was simple and direct. "The dragon is under our protection. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." "Sir," the corporate tactical officer said urgently, "more ships are arriving. These readings don't make sense. Some of these vessels are showing mass signatures larger than our biggest dreadnoughts." Admiral Kwan made the decision that would define the rest of his career. "All ships battle formation. Prepare to engage the alien fleet. We didn't come this far to be intimidated by some primitives with old technology." That was when Daeun Park, monitoring the situation from her smaller ship, made a choice that surprised everyone, including herself. "Admiral, this is Agent Park," she transmitted on a private channel. "I strongly advise against engaging these vessels. I've had personal contact with the dragon in question. Its capabilities far exceed anything in our current threat assessments. Agent Park, you will maintain radio silence unless specifically ordered to speak." The Admiral snapped back. "We have our orders from the highest levels of the corporate hierarchy." Daeun looked at her own tactical displays and realized that the corporate fleet was about to make a mistake. That would cost thousands of lives. She had spent her career hunting dangerous targets, and she had developed good instincts for when a situation was about to go very badly wrong. "Admiral," she tried again. "Request permission to board the station and attempt a negotiated solution." Permission denied. "All ships open fire." The corporate fleet unleashed everything they had. Energy beams, missile barrages, and particle cannons all targeted the alien vessels protecting Nexus Station. The attack was devastating enough to destroy entire planetary defense systems. It did absolutely nothing to the alien ships. The energy weapons simply disappeared when they hit the alien hulls, absorbed by technology that converted the attacks into harmless light. The missiles exploded prematurely, their guidance systems confused by fields that bent space itself around the targets. Even the most powerful particle beams were deflected as if they had struck mirrors made of compressed gravity. "Impossible," Admiral Kwan whispered. "No technology can defend against that level of concentrated firepower." The alien response was swift and precise. Instead of returning fire with weapons, they did something that terrified the corporate crews far more. They reached out with invisible forces and simply turned off the corporate ships. One by one, the battle group's vessels went dark. Their engines stopped. Their weapons powered down. Their life support systems switched to emergency backup. In less than 5 minutes, 30 of the most advanced warships in the corporate fleet had been reduced to helpless metal shells drifting in space. "How are they doing this?" someone screamed over the communication channels. Through his bond with Astrum, Jiho understood exactly what was happening. The alien ships weren't using weapons in any conventional sense. They were manipulating the fundamental forces that powered the corporate technology. Every engine, every computer, every energy system aboard those ships depended on the same cosmic forces that dragons had learned to control millions of years ago. "They're not attacking the ships," Jiho explained to his companions in the maintenance bay. "They're just convincing the universe that those engines don't want to work anymore." "That's impossible," Minsu said, but his voice carried more awe than disbelief. "Not impossible," Hana said, studying her readings in fascination. "Just operating on principles that our science doesn't understand yet. They're treating technology like a living system instead of a collection of machines." Admiral Kwan found himself in command of a fleet that could barely maintain life support, let alone continue fighting. But the corporate consortium had not reached its position of power by backing down from difficult situations. "This is Admiral Kwan to all corporate assets in this sector," he transmitted on emergency frequencies. "We are under attack by unknown alien forces using prohibited weapons technology, requesting immediate reinforcement from all available battle groups." The transmission was answered by a new voice, one that made everyone who heard it stop what they were doing. "Admiral Kwan," the voice said in perfect standard, though it carried harmonics that suggested the speaker was not human. "You are not under attack. You are experiencing a demonstration of defensive capabilities. Your ships and crews are unharmed and will remain so as long as you do not attempt to harm the beings under our protection." "Who are you?" Admiral Kwan demanded. "We are the keepers of the ancient compact," came the reply. "We are species who remember the old agreements made when the galaxy was young. We have waited in the hidden places of space for the return of our dragon partners. That time has now come." Through his bond with Astrum, Jiho felt the dragon's deep satisfaction. The keepers had been his people's oldest allies, species that had evolved alongside the dragons and learned to work with them to maintain cosmic stability. When the dragons were hunted to extinction, the keepers had withdrawn from galactic civilization, disgusted by the brutality and short-sightedness they had witnessed. "The dragon belongs to the corporate consortium," Admiral Kwan insisted, though his voice now carried more desperation than authority. "We have legal salvage rights to all specimens of extinct species." "Your legal system does not apply to beings who are older than your entire civilization," the keeper responded. "The dragon chooses his own path, as dragons always have, and he has chosen to bond with the human called Jiho Kim." On Nexus Station, Jiho felt the weight of cosmic attention settling on him like a heavy cloak. Through his enhanced senses, he could perceive representatives of dozens of species all watching him with intense interest. Some were curious, some were hopeful, and some were clearly evaluating whether he was worthy of the trust that had been placed in him. "The bonding is real," he heard one of the keepers say to another in a language that bypassed his ears entirely and spoke directly to his consciousness. "The human shows the signs. The dragon has chosen well." But even as hope grew in his heart, Jiho sensed something else approaching through hyperspace, ships that radiated cold intelligence and terrible purpose. The corporate reinforcements were arriving, but they were not alone. Through Astrum's ancient memories, he recognized the energy signatures. The Vorthon Collective had decided to reveal themselves. The energy beings who had orchestrated the dragon extinction were coming to finish what they had started centuries ago. "This isn't over," he said grimly to his companions. "The real enemy is still coming." Through their bond, Astrum shared his own grim determination. The dragon had spent centuries planning for this moment, preparing for the day when he would face the beings who had destroyed his species. Now, with a human partner to anchor his power and ancient allies to support his cause, he was finally ready for the confrontation that would determine the future of the galaxy. In the depths of space, reality itself began to bend as forces that had been gathering for millennia finally converged on a single point. The battle for Nexus Station was about to become something far greater. It was about to become the battle for the soul of the galaxy itself. Jiho felt Astrum's consciousness merging more deeply with his own as they prepared for what was coming. Human adaptability and dragon wisdom, mortal determination and immortal power, all focused on a single goal. They would not let the galaxy forget its true nature again. The Vorthon Collective arrived not as ships but as tears in space itself. Reality bent and twisted as beings of pure energy forced their way into normal space-time. They had no physical forms, existing instead as patterns of conscious force that could reshape matter and energy at will. Through his bond with Astrum, Jiho experienced the dragon's ancient terror and rage. These were the beings who had convinced the younger species to hunt dragons to extinction. They fed on cosmic instability, growing stronger as the universe became more chaotic and unbalanced. Finally, came a voice that spoke directly into the minds of every conscious being near Nexus Station. The last dragon reveals himself. We have waited so long to finish what we started. The Vorthan presence was like ice water in Jiho's veins. Through his enhanced senses, he could perceive their true nature. They were parasites that had been slowly draining the life force of the galaxy for millions of years. The dragons had been the only species capable of stopping them. You made a mistake. Astrom's mental voice carried to every ship in the area through his bond with Jiho. You assumed that dragons could only work alone. That was when the true scope of the dragon's plan became clear. For centuries, while imprisoned and traded like property, Astrom had been sending out mental calls across the galaxy, not to other dragons who were all dead, but to species capable of forming the same kind of bond that he now shared with Jiho. The response had been slow at first. Most species lacked the emotional depth necessary for dragon bonding. But gradually, individuals from dozens of different civilizations had begun to answer his call. They came in secret, drawn by dreams and visions they could not explain. Now they revealed themselves. Ships began decloaking around Nexus Station. Not just the ancient keeper vessels, but newer craft carrying beings from across the galaxy. And aboard each ship was someone like Jiho. Individuals who had formed bonds with the fragments of dragon consciousness that Astrom had preserved and shared over the centuries. Impossible. The Vorthan voice carried fury and disbelief. The dragons are extinct. We made certain of it. Dragons are extinct, Jiho said, his voice somehow carrying across space to reach every mind in the area. But the dragon legacy lives on. In humans, in keepers, in every species willing to accept the responsibility of cosmic guardianship. Through his bond with Astrom, Jiho felt his consciousness expanding to touch dozens of other bonded pairs. A young keeper scientist named Veltar, who had bonded with dragon memories preserved in ancient crystals. A human engineer called Sarah Chen, who had found dragon DNA fragments and somehow awakened them to new life. An insectoid philosopher whose entire hive mind had merged with dragon wisdom, spanning millennia. Each bond was different, shaped by the unique nature of the species involved, but together they formed something that had never existed before. A network of cosmic guardians drawn from every corner of the galaxy, united by their connection to dragon knowledge and power. The Vorthan collective had expected to face a single dying dragon. Instead, they found themselves confronting an entirely new form of life. The bonds between different species had created capabilities that pure dragons had never possessed. Human creativity enhanced by dragon wisdom, keeper technology guided by dragon intuition, hive mind processing power amplified by dragon cosmic awareness. You think your little alliance can stand against us? The Vorthan presence began to exert its power, trying to tear holes in space-time itself. We are beings of pure energy. We shaped the cosmos when your ancestors were still crawling in mud. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Vorthan struck with forces that could collapse stars, trying to destabilize the space around Nexus Station. But the bonded guardians responded with something the energy beings had never encountered before. Cooperation. Where the Vorthan used brute force to bend reality to their will, the guardians worked together to heal and strengthen the fabric of space-time itself. Dragon knowledge showed them how to perceive the cosmic web, while the unique abilities of different species gave them tools to repair damage that had been accumulating for millennia. Jiho found himself at the center of the Guardian network, his human adaptability making him a natural coordinator for the group effort. Through Astrom, he could sense the cosmic forces at work. Through his connections to other bonded pairs, he could direct their combined power with precision no single dragon could have achieved. Minsu, we need more power to the station's shields, he called out, somehow knowing exactly what each ally needed to do. Hana, start evacuating the civilian areas to the lower levels. Dayun, we need your ship to carry wounded to the medical stations. The corporate agent had joined the defense effort after witnessing the true scope of what they were facing. Her bounty hunting instincts told her that the galaxy's survival was more important than any paycheck. As the battle raged, something unexpected began to happen. The stress fractures in space-time that had been weakening the galaxy for centuries began to heal. The Guardian Network was not just defending Nexus Station. They were repairing fundamental damage that the Vorthon had been causing for millions of years. No, the Vorthan voice carried panic for the first time. You do not understand what you are doing. The chaos feeds us. Without instability, we cannot exist. Then maybe it's time for you to find a new way to exist, Jiho replied, or a new place to do it. The combined power of the Guardian Network reached out across space, gently but firmly encouraging the Vorthon collective to leave the galaxy entirely. It was not an attack or an exile, but rather an invitation to find a new home in the vast emptiness between galaxies, where their energy feeding would not harm inhabited worlds. Some of the Vorthon accepted the offer, disappearing into the cosmic void. Others tried to resist but found their power diminishing as the space around them became more stable and ordered. Without chaos to feed on, they could not maintain their coherent existence. The battle ended not with explosions or destruction, but with a gradual sense of peace settling over the entire sector. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy felt truly stable. 6 months later, Jiho stood on the observation deck of Guardian Station, the new headquarters that had been built from the combined technologies of dozens of species. Through the transparent walls, he could see ships arriving from across the galaxy, carrying new volunteers who had heard the call to become cosmic guardians. The bonding process was not easy. Most individuals who attempted it failed to achieve full connection with dragon consciousness, but those who succeeded became part of something larger than any single species could achieve alone. How many active guardians do we have now? Hana asked, joining him at the observation window. She had become the network's chief researcher, studying the bonding process and helping new volunteers prepare for the challenges they would face. 237, Jiho replied, with more arriving every day. Astrum says the network can support thousands once we fully understand how to optimize the connections. Through their bond, he felt the dragon's satisfaction. The plan that had taken centuries to develop was finally bearing fruit. The galaxy would never again be defenseless against cosmic threats. Minsu approached them, his engineer coveralls replaced by the simple robes that had become the unofficial uniform of Guardian technical staff. The long-range sensors are picking up something interesting, he said with a grin. It looks like there's a whole cluster of dragon eggs in the Andromeda galaxy. Apparently some of our friends made it there before the extinction. Jiho felt Astrum's joy like warm sunlight in his mind. The dragons were not truly extinct after all. And now, with the Guardian Network to protect them, they could begin to return to their role as cosmic caretakers. Prepare an expedition ship, Jiho said. It's time to bring our family home. As he watched a young girl from the outer colonies successfully bond with dragon consciousness for the first time, Jiho smiled. His simple act of spending 50 credits on a dying creature had transformed into something that would reshape the galaxy for generations to come. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, and through his enhanced senses he could feel the cosmic web growing stronger and more stable with each passing day. Humanity had found its place in the universe not as conquerors or exploiters, but as partners in the greatest responsibility of all. They were the guardians of tomorrow, and tomorrow had never looked more promising.